Alright guys, your next performer is Stephanie Garibaldi. She's a huge fan of science, having been raised by her scientific statistician of a father to pay attention to unit prices and factor in Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. After more than a decade of storytelling, she's super excited to perform in her first ever show that combines science and comedy. You can also catch her hosting the upcoming Speakeasy DC show on April 14th at Town, where you're guaranteed plenty of comedy, but you guys have to bring the science. All right, please welcome Stephanie Garibaldi.
So how many of you have ever gotten yourself into something where you just feel like such a complete fraud that it's only a matter of time and degree before you're exposed and horribly humiliated? A lot of See, that's what happened to me when entering the 7th grade, my junior high. I was informed that I'd been selected to be part of the gifted and talented classes. I knew it was a mistake. I knew a mistake had been made, but I was determined to get good enough grades so that when they uncovered the mistake, they'd just say, "Oh, she's doing fine, just let her stay." Because I was pretty competitive in spite of not being all that bright. And the thing is, it worked well because, let's face it, junior high is not very hard. And so, I mean, if you just put any effort into it at all, if you care in the least, you can succeed. So that's how I kind of rolled through 7th grade. And, math came easier to me than science. I don't know why people always assume that if you're going to be good at math, you're good at science. They're not. They can be mutually exclusive. And I had a particularly hard time in my biology class in 7th grade. Not only did we have to do the dissecting of the frogs, which is always, but also they'd done this experiment. Did you do this one where you have like a little dish of hot water, a little dish of cold water, and you do the back and forth, you put your hand, immerse it in one, then the other? And after you've done this, the teacher explains that you've just killed off a bunch of your cells. I think that's really irresponsible for 7th graders. So I wasn't feeling great about my science prowess when at the end of the 7th grade year, they sent this letter out to all the students in these gifted and talented classes announcing this new class. It was cutting edge, it was brand new. In the 8th grade, if you got into it, it was only for the elite of the elite. And I gotta tell you, they had me at the first elite. I was there. The idea was, it was 2 hours a day. They'd combine an hour of science with an hour of industrial arts. So you wouldn't just learn about science, but you'd build the things you were learning about. And this, again, I didn't necessarily know anything about industrial arts. It turned out that was a fancy name for shop, which was a little disappointing. I wasn't that great at science, but I still knew that I had to be in this class because of the way they had cleverly positioned it. So you couldn't just opt in. You had to write a letter explaining why you wanted to be in this cutting edge class. So I just laid it all out there. I mean, it was so much BS. It was like, my life is science, and if I don't get into this class, you will end my life. So they let me in, not wanting a teenage suicide on their hands, and I gotta tell you, you have this like real feeling of triumph whenever you kind of sneak your way into something until you get there and you realize you have to do it now. And the very first day, they showed what they called a safety film for shop. Have you seen these? It's basic. It's like a horror movie. I mean, they show these people who clearly aren't that bright, but they're wearing like long, dangly things that get caught in the table saw, and there's blood. They show this, so somebody was filming while this happened instead of helping. I'll never forget. There's this one guy who, I kid you not, was missing 3 of his 4 limbs. Okay, so he's like this. He's like, can't really do it. He's like, if only I had been more safety conscious. He's like, what? table saw. This film had the effect that I'm sure they desired. I wanted nothing to do with the table saw. And it was kind of problematic because they really did expect you to build things. And the first project, now luckily they gave you a lot of time. So our first month, we had an entire month to build a machine that would keep time accurately within 15% for 3 minutes. So I had to be a little clever and think of something that didn't involve much table saw action. And I came up with what I thought was a pretty good idea. It did have a little table saw, but I used these 2 really long pieces of wood to try to guide the other. So I survived, obviously, have all my limbs. But my idea was this. It was, you could buy one of these kind of long, kind of rods, like a little metal rod, and that was already made and cut. I could get the length I wanted, so that was good. So I got a 6-foot rod. And a 6-foot rod, that sounds hot. Anyway, it wasn't like the last guy's story with the wife, nothing like that. So, and all I had to do, and this was a tricky part, was I had to build kind of like a little wooden frame around it. And the idea was that I got this little piece of cork that was on the rod. And then there was a spring that came out from it. At the end of the spring was this adorable frog. And the idea is, so the cork's at the top of the rod, and all you do is you pull down the frog on the spring, and you let go, and he bounces his way, and it slowly moves the cork down the rod. So I thought this was great, and it took me almost a month, but I managed to get frame built and everything. And then I took it home, for the last part, because I painted little lily pads at the bottom. And I did the practice to see if it actually kept time for 3 minutes. And it turns out that because the torque is a variable that is uncontrollable because it's like human error. Some people sometimes are like, yeah, I could have told you that. So it just greatly varied. Like every time I pulled it down, I would do like a different amount of torque. And so every now and then it would magically hit within the 15% accuracy window, which, in case you're wondering, it needed to come in between 233 and 327 to make it be within 15%. So, see, math, not a problem. But anyway, so I'm a little freaked out. I practice as many times as I can the night before, trying to get my own human error, stabilized, so that I figure I got like about a 50% chance of hitting it in the thing. Yeah, maybe 53. Yeah, and so the next morning, we have to drive it back in to school. And it's not my father with his larger car. It's my mother with her Volkswagen Rabbit. I'm sorry, Volkswagen Bug, Love Bug. And I don't know why I didn't think of it before. I guess because I'm not really much of a scientist, but it just didn't occur to me until we reached the garage. I was like, how are we going to put this 6-foot tall thing in? My mom, though, she's not scientific, but she's clever. And she goes, oh, no problem. And she just rolls the sunroof down. And she kind of puts it in over the top. It goes down, and I'm in the passenger seat, and she's in the driver's seat. And my mom's always in a rush, and she drives emotionally, and she just put the car in reverse. And just goes sailing out the garage, and all of a sudden, see, I think a lot more of you are like scientific, because I was really surprised by this. All of a sudden, there's like the most horrible sound of wood against the metal of the frame of the garage, and we're in this shower of like wood chips, and the frog goes flying clear of the vehicle, still with his little spring attached, and I start to sob. I mean, this is a month's worth of work that is now just surrounding us. And the more I cry, my mother laughs. Like that. And she's really insensitive to my pain. And I finally say to her, like, what could you possibly find funny about this? And she says, oh, when I was a kid, I was late to school, so my mother had to drive me, and I had all these petticoats I was trying to get in, so I hadn't closed the door yet, and she backed up and took out the mailbox. And this just reminded me, because I was crying and she was laughing. So apparently this always happens in our family. It's like the whole cycle has come. But I am just, as I sit there, wondering, what this this is our first project, and this is the elite of the elite people. I mean, and I know it's because I faked my love for science. I know it's all coming back to bite me now. This is what I deserve. If I had been truly interested in science, this would not have happened. I would have lovingly walked the 3 miles to school carrying my project like this if I was really a scientist, you know. So I don't know what we're going to do. But my mom says, don't worry, I'll write a note. She runs in, writes this note. I don't know what she puts in it. It takes her a little bit of time. We finally get to school. I have no project, but I come shamefacedly and I hand my teacher, Dr. Lenneman, the science teacher part of the equation, I hand him the note, hoping that this will work magically, that my mother's, whatever she's written will do the trick. And he reads it and he starts laughing. Like, everybody is laughing at me in my life at this point. And apparently she had this big, huge thing about the last week that included my brother's snake, when they had fed him the rat that he was supposed to eat, had eaten the snake. And so it was this big hysterical event. It was that combined with the smash, destroy project, and everything went wrong. And so even though he laughed a lot, so is it all right then if I get a pass on this project since it was destroyed? And he says, oh no, you still have to do your presentation. And I'm just walking away, I would say, okay, and I'm walking away and I'm thinking, what? So I use a little school payphone, we had those back then, and I call my mother, and I'm hysterical, I'm explaining, I don't know how I'm supposed to do a project, I don't have a project to do a presentation. She says 3 words, Emperor's New Clothes. And then it hits me, and I get it. So when it's my turn to get in front of the class, I drag my project on like it's this real heavy object, and I pantomime moving it up, and I position it just so that as I'm looking at it, I can also see the clock at the back of the room, which has a second hand. And I explain to people, even though they can obviously see for themselves, but I still describe the project, the concept behind it, and the frog's name, Frederick. I get everybody ready, and I say, starting time now, and I do this, and then this is the hard part. For exactly 3 minutes, I had to go like this.
For 3 minutes.
Which is a really long time. That's probably the longest 3 minutes of my life to this day, and I've been married, okay, people, so. That's a great question. Anyway, so I waited, and I timed it just right, so that I made it like the frog hit the bottom and stopped right at 3 minutes exactly. So I wound up getting an A+ on the project accuracy and an A+ on the presentation. And so I learned that it's not that I'm a fraud, it's that I can fake it when I need to. And this has been invaluable in getting through college classes, dating people who are way above my, hot factor, and of course, in doing these kinds of projects, especially through work and getting jobs that I'm completely unqualified for. Thank you.